Okay, so let's start. Everybody can hear me well? Yes, okay. So I am Maisha Kedu. So this is a long sugya. We'll go through the Surat HaDishmata later, but basically we started with Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Shemuel in the name of Rab. I said something last week which I wasn't so medayek. I said that Rab came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, but actually he started out in Babylonia. So he started out in Babylonia. He went to Eretz Yisrael. He studied with Rabbeinu. In progress. Right. He studied with Rabbeinu Hakadosh, and with his uncle Rabbi Hiya, who was, Tamid Haver of Rabbeinu Hakadosh, and then he went to Bavel, right? And then he sort of founded Yeshivat Surah. That's as opposed to Shemuel, who founded Yeshivat Nehavdea. I also wanted to correct something else I said. When I said that Shemuel, I said that Shemuel didn't really found Yeshivat Nehavdea. What I meant by that is that the synagogue there in Nehavdea was around since the days of Beit Rishon, which is to say that when Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel, he exiled the Sanhedrin and the aristocracy of Judea. This is during the days of King Yehoiachin and King Galut Yehoiachin. Also, the king went to Galut as well. They took with them some stones and some soil from the area of the Bet HaMikdash. Lekayem ma shene'emar ki rasu abadecha et avaneha ve'et afaraha yachonenu. So, and they started and that's where they started Nehardea. That's where they started the synagogue in Nehardea. That place is referred to Deshaf Ve'yativ Benehardea. So Deshaf Ve'yativ Benehardea, the synagogue, Deshaf Ve'yativ, the Bet Kanishta, Deshaf Ve'yativ Benehardea. You find that in Masechet Nida at the beginning. There's a story there with Shemuel and Rabbi Yehuda. It says Havu Kaime Aigra the Bet Kanishta, Deshaf Ve'yativ Benehardea. That's in Masechet Nida. I don't remember the exact page. I think it was Daf Yod Bet or something. But you can check it up. It's there. And then there was also in Masechet Megillah, I think either around Daf Kaf Zayin, Daf Kaf Het, in Masechet Megillah, you have there a story with Rav Sheshat, who was blind and he was studying in the Bet Kenishta, the Shaf Yativ ben Nehardea. So that's Yeshivat Nehardea. Why am I saying this? Shaf Yativ means literally skipped. It skipped because it skipped from the Bet HaMikdash, and the Hachamim believe that the Shekhinah went from the Bet HaMikdash and it jumped to Nehardea. That's why it's called the Shaf. Shaf means it skipped or it jumped and went to Nehardea. So I just wanted to correct what I said. When I said Shemuel didn't found the Yeshivat Nehardea, what I meant to say is he wasn't the founder of the synagogue as such. It was there for many generations prior with the Churban HaBayit. Churban Beit Rishon, right? Churban Beit Rishon, I meant. But of course, he was a founder of Yeshivat Nehardea, as Rav was a founder of Yeshivat Asura. So I just wanted to correct those less than precise statements. Now back to the Gemara in Masechet Ketubot. Any questions as to what I just said? Okay. So the Gemara that we're studying now is a continuation of the discussion, and the summary of what we did until now is as follows. There are only two Emoraitic notes on the Mishnah. The first one we examined in Sugya number 1, which was a statement of Shemuel, and the second one was a statement of Amar Rav Yitzhak Bar Shemuel Amarav. There are no other Emoraitic notes on the Mishnah. Second point, we mentioned Shakedu several times over the course of the last two sugyot. Several times he said Shakedu, Shakedu, Shakedu. We're going to use this as a pretext to bring a baraita. Perhaps this baraita is a tosefta, I'm not sure. That's a common explanation, is that the baraita that we're going to be examining is actually the tosefta. I'm not sure about that. It may or may not be, but let's assume it is. But it's a baraita, ben kach or ben kach, and it's a tanya. So we're going to bring that. So we're using the shakedu as a pretext to bring this baraita and analyze the baraita. The further Emoraitic discussions will now be around this baraita, right? Now, why do we have so few discussions on? Why do we have so few Amoraitic statements about our Mishnah? And the reason is simple. It was such a short Mishnah. Betulani said, that's it. That's a Mishnah. That was it. So it's understandable how there weren't so many Amoraic statements on our Mishnah. And finally, the two words that are starting now in the Sugya. It's not the beginning of the Sugya. We started this beginning last week. Mai shakedu. So again, this is the pretext to bring the Baraita. What is the source for the concept of shakedu? Shakedu Hachamim, right? That the Hachamim were insistent or persistent that the preparation for the wedding of a Jewish young lady should be proper preparation. So we're going to do this. I'm going to read the Baraita. And then after I read the Baraita, you will see that the Baraita introduces us to three concepts. Each one of these three concepts will get a place in the Sugya, meaning this Sugya is going to examine each one of these three concepts separately, which is why it is such a long Sugya. Okay, so let's start by just reading the Baraita. I'm going to read it, I don't want to say it quickly in the sense of in a sloppy way, but I'm going to read it without going into the details, and then we're going to review it a second time, and then we will begin to do the details. So just want to explain to you the roadmap for this class. Ike, the Talmud Bavli you have there, the green book all the way to the left. Yeah? All right, so everybody's clear as to the roadmap, what we're doing. So I'm going to read the Baraita now. You will see that there are some differences between the Sugya that we have here in the printed edition, the Vilna Shas, and we're Daf Gimel Amud Bet, the very top of the page. You will see some differences. I will read the correct version of the Gemara. All right, so everybody's ready? All right, I'll take that as a yes. Shetika kehoda, that's halacha, so I'll take it as a yes. So my shakedu. So what is the source for shakedu? Detanya. And for those of you who are new to studying Gemara correctly and precisely, the word Tanya comes before a Baraita, where the Baraita was approved by the yeshiva and therefore can be quoted in the yeshiva as authoritative. Because not every Baraita is authoritative. Many Baraitot, they have issues with them. Not everything was quoted in the yeshiva as authoritative. This was. Now what does it say, the Tanya? Because right now we are in Yeshivat Surah, and it was quoted in Yeshivat Surah as an authoritative Baraita. You understand? If it was quoted in all the yeshivot, it would be referred to as Detanu or Rabbanan. So Detanya means this is accepted in Yeshivat Surah. They did the due diligence, they did the whatever review of the Baraita, and they accepted it in the yeshiva. So Detanya. מפני מה אמרו בתולה נישאת ליום רביעי. What's the reason that the Hachamim prescribed that the wedding of the Betula should be on Wednesday? שאם היה לו טענת בתולים, היה משכים לבית דין. As we know, the reason, we said this several times, is so that on Thursday, when the Bet Din is sitting in session, the husband would then have an opportunity to go to the Bet Din and issue any complaints he may have about his wife's status. ותנסה באחד בשבת, ואם היה לו טענת בתולים, היה משכים לבית דין. So the Baraita continues, and it says, according to that logic, the Hachamim should have prescribed that she can also get married that a Betula can also get married on Sunday. Because if you get married on Sunday, you wake up the next day, and if he has the Ta'anat Betulim, he can go to Bet Din on Monday. Answer, שקדו חכמים על תקנת בנות ישראל שיהא אדם טורח בסעודה 3 ימים. So this is a famous shakedu, and now we have the source for shakedu. The source for shakedu is here in this Baraita. Shakedu Hachamim, the Hachamim were persistent, and they wanted that the Benot Israel will get a proper wedding. And a proper wedding requires en somchim ala nes, right? A lot of people think, no, it's going to be a miracle, everything's going to be fine. The answer is no. If you don't prepare, there will be no miracle. So, so therefore, you have to be toreach. Yeah, but I'm doing a mitzvah. No, you have to be toreach. That's just a fact of life. So you sheyeh adam toreach. Yes, very good. Who said that? Shimon. Very good. Yes. Very nice. Exactly. שיהיה אדם טורח בסעודה 3 ימים, אחד בשבת, ושני בשבת, ושישי בשבת, וברביעי כונסה. This is all part of the baraita. So now we have the famous shakedu. Again, this shakedu was the pretext for bringing this baraita. Okay? So shakedu. So the only way, if you would have done the wedding on Sunday, there was no possibility of preparing for the wedding on Shabbat. And Erev Shabbat, you can't prepare for the wedding because Erev Shabbat, you're preparing for the Saudat Shabbat. So therefore, the only way this can be done is Ubar Vi'i Konsa. Okay? Now the reason I'm not convinced that this Baraita is the Tosefta is because I looked at the Tosefta Kipshuta, and he has I don't want to say completely different version, but he has a version that's sufficiently different so as to really make the sugya not comprehensible. So I'm not saying it is the Tosefta, I'm not saying it's not the Tosefta. Sarich Iyun, and only based on Iyun, we may be able to determine whether this Baraita is from the Tosefta or not. Let's continue though. The Baraita continues. The Baraita says, Umi sakana ve'ilach naharu ha'am lichnos b'shelishi. The Baraita says something interesting. There was a sakana, and this is a key term. Lieberman points out also in the Tosefta Kipshuta, and my father agreed, that when you see the word sakana in the Talmud, it refers to the Hadrianic persecutions. Lieberman wrote in, I'm assuming maybe in the 60s, I'm not exactly sure, there was a Sefer Yovel in honor of Salo Baron, the famous historian, and that's where he wrote that the word sakana in the Gemara refers to the Hadrianic persecutions, which were actually terrible and horrendous. Holocaust, Holocaust Day, I guess. We know that there was a lot of bad stuff. So that was the sakana. And again, my father agrees with Lieberman's point here. So umi sakana ve'ilah. So because there was some danger, the Baraita doesn't say what the danger was. There was some danger for the woman to get married on Wednesday. So it became the minhag of the people to lichnos b'shevi'i. Now, what's important is nahagu ha'am. The Chachamim em lo bitlu et takana shebetulana said leyom revi'i. They didn't know that takana. The people annulled it. Oh, maybe they didn't know it. Okay, maybe that's too strong a word. That's incorrect. I retract that word. Nahagu. They couldn't do it. So nahagu ha'am lichnos b'shelishi. They decided, notwithstanding the takanat hachamim, that no, they're going to get married on Tuesday, not get married on Wednesday. Why? There was some danger. We don't know what the danger was. We'll find out later. And the hachamim accepted it. Meaning, the hachamim could have said, what are you doing? We told you Wednesday. Why are you doing Tuesday? At least come to us. Ask for permission. The hachamim said, yeah, you're right. This is an appropriate response to the sakana. Now, I just want to explain that and this is brought in the Shita Mekubeset, he says something correct. He says that when it says Naharu ha'am lichnos b'shelishi, it means Naharu ha'am also to lichnos b'shelishi, meaning they could do it barvi'i, but they would also do it b'shelishi. And there was a certain logic to this strategy. Meaning, they didn't just say, instead of doing it Wednesday, we're going to start doing it only on Tuesday. No. The Chnos B'Shelishi means, and also on Tuesday. That's an important point. And as I said, Hachamim did not censure them. Lo mi'hu b'yadam Hachamim. Ubasheni lo yichnos. Okay, this is a continuation of the baraita. What about Monday? If you're already doing it Tuesday, how about Monday? No. Although they were allowed to do it on Tuesday, lo mechubi adam chachamim, they didn't allow Monday. All right. Meaning, to the extent that you're not going to follow the takanat hachamim because of sakana, so be it. But the takana is still there. You can't ignore it. So therefore, we're going to allow you to do Tuesday in addition to Wednesday, for whatever reason. We'll see later. But we're not going to be saying just do Monday, just do Sunday, just do no. So they didn't allow. Again, uba sheni lo yichnos. Ve'im mechamat ha'ones mutar. But if there is some ones, and again, we don't know what the ones is, some extenuating circumstance, mutar, then you can get married also on Yom Sheni. Now, what ones? What sakana? We'll see. But I want to make a point. There's a difference between lo mechubi alam hachamim, which is when the people decided to get married also on Tuesday and not just on Wednesday. It says because of the sakana, the people decided to get married also on Tuesday. Lo mechubi alam is not as mutar, right? Meaning, in the case of ones, mutar. That's meaning, go ahead, no problem. It's less than, okay? Continuing in the Baraita. So we have two topics so far. We have sakana. What's sakana about? We have ones. What's ones about? And then we have, we're going to see that ones has to do with avlut, right? Ones is going to be related to avlut. So we're going to be going into the laws of avlut. That's, again, this guy is going to introduce us to many. They used to call the Masechet Ketuvot, it used to be called a Shas Katan, because it covers such, and I remember when I studied with my father used to say that there's no Masechet that covers as many topics, as many diverse topics as Masechet Ketuvot. All right. So, ve'im hamata ones mutar. Continuing in the Baraita, umafrishin et hatan min hakala lele Shabbat tehilla. But it's lecha dodi likrat kala. It's not lecha dodi likrat kala. Does anybody know dikduk well enough to say what the word kala means? What's the difference? Like kala tasimam?
Annihilation.
Yes, exactly. So when you say lecha dodi likrat kala, bar minan, they all say it. It's like, I remember I used to be in Israel, and lecha dodi likrat kala, and I used to say, it's mamash, it's meharef, bar minan. How can you say lecha dodi likrat kala?
But it goes with Shabbat Shalom.
Yes, Shabbat Shalom. Okay, but that's at least you're cursing your fellow man. Here, bar minan, you're, all right. I was told by a friend of mine who's a rabbi that in Yeshiva of Flatbush, they don't teach dikduk anymore. They insist that the people speak Hebrew in the classrooms, that the teachers rather speak Hebrew in the classrooms, but they don't teach dikduk. So they don't modern Hebrew. So that's the idea, meaning modern. First of all, so that's fascinating. So there's almost like an understanding or an agreement that modern Hebrew, we don't require dikduk, which I think might be unique, among languages in the world. Can you imagine a person speaking English like this? I don't know if that would fly, but that's the model, I guess. Modern Hebrew equals no dikduk. And I guess in that context, you can say lecha dodi likrat kala, because nobody understands what they're saying anyway. Okay. Now, final point of the Baraita. ומפרישין את החתן מן הכלה ליל שבת תחילה מפני שהוא עושה habura. And the final law in the Baraita is, if the let's say they got married on Wednesday. Let's say they got married on Wednesday properly, and he couldn't. The hatan could not consummate the wedding. He tried, he couldn't, and now it's Shabbat, Friday night. So he still wants to consummate the wedding. says mafrishin et hatan min hakala lele Shabbat tahila, because if she's she has betula, she has dam betulim. So it's saying that it's forbidden for the man to be with the betula for the first time, because there's going to be dam betulim, and that's oseh habura. Oseh habura on Shabbat is asur, of course, right? What's the isur of doing a habura on Shabbat? Who knows? Does anybody know? It's mishum dash. It's a tolada of dash. Yes. Okay. So all right. So we're going to deal with these topics. We're going to deal with the question of sakana. We're going to deal with the issue of oseh habura on Shabbat, and it's going to bring us so many laws on Shabbat. And we're going to deal with the issues of ablut. So it's going to be a fascinating sugya. Every sugya that you study, you enter the sugya as one person and you leave as another person. This sugya, it's just going to be fantastic in that regard. Okay, so you have the basic roadmap of the sugya. Now I'm going to go a little past. I'm going to read now a little past the baraita. I'm going to continue a little. The baraita is finished. We're done. Okay. The first topic that the sugya deals with is my sakana. Right? What was the sakana specifically? Ilema de amre betula haniset leyom revi'i tehareg nahagu legamre ni'keruha. Now you notice I read ni'keruha. I'm going to read it again. My sakana. What sakana are you dealing with? Ilema, perhaps, shall we say? Ilema means shall we say? The amre, that they betula niset haniset liyom revi'i tehareg, so that there was some sort of decree on the part of Hadrian that if a betula gets married on Wednesday, she's going to be killed. Maybe that's a sakana, right? They made a lot of you can't do berit milah, right? You can't do ibur hashana, right? Maybe here also it was talking about you can't get married on Wednesday. They knew that the Hakamim made a takana, and they said if you do it, death penalty. Nahagu legamre ni'keruha. How can you say nahagu ha'am? If that was the case, there would be no nahagu ha'am. The Chachamim themselves would have annulled their own takana. Right? You can't say that there's a sakanat nefashot, and the Chachamim are saying, no, we insist that you get married on Wednesday. No. Bi'okel the takana, and that's it. Legamre ni'keruha. All right? So, Amar Abba, my father said that the older Gersot have Amar Abba. So I'm making you aware of that. I'm going to read Amar Abba with an aleph, not Amar Abba with the head. Okay? So Amar Rabba. The Amre, no. So Rabba is now the one who records what happened. And we're going to see that the Gemara doesn't say Ella Amar Rabba. The Gemara says Amar Rabba. Now usually, when you have a discussion in the Gemara and somebody proposes something in the yeshiva, and then there's a pivot to another direction. So we're pivoting to another direction. We say, Ella Amar Rabbi Peloni. Rabbi Almoni said ABC. No, ABC doesn't work. So Rabbi Peloni, Ella Amar Rabbi Peloni, XYZ. Here we don't have that. So this Amar Rabba is interesting because we have a statement of Rabba, and we're using the ilema as a pretext to introduce the statement made by Rabba elsewhere. This sugya, or at least the beginning of the sugya was Yeshivat Surah, but somebody was aware of what Rabba said at a later point in time, and this ilema, the amne betulan and aniset the yom revi'i tarek. I don't think that somebody believed that was the case, but rather they're using that question as a pretext to introduce the statement of Rabba. So, Amar Rabba, de amre betula haniset leyom revi'i Tiba'el lahagmon. So no, Rava says the sakana was. We're going to explain it in a moment. That there was a rule that if a betula gets married on Wednesday, the hagmon I think is like a local Roman governor or local Roman ruler would have first dibs on the woman, right? If she's a betula, they're gonna have first dibs on the woman. So, and that was the sakana. We're gonna explain it. Everything is gonna be clear, but I'm just reading it just to kind of introduce you to the topic, and then we're gonna look at it more clearly. So first, let me deal with the question of tiba'el lahagmon. And this raises a whole topic which we're going to be looking at in a few minutes. The topic being Kiddush Hashem, and when do the laws of Kiddush Hashem apply? When don't they apply? But first, and again, it is Yom HaShoah. I have to say that I am completely opposed, and I think it's an insult to Am Yisrael that they chose Chodesh Nisan, which is Chodesh HaGeulah, as a time to have Yom HaShoah. So I'm aware of that, and I think it's really inexcusable. I mean, it's actually quite shocking. But that's what it is. That's the situation. So we don't see vidui and knees, right? It's but we're saying Yom HaShoah. I don't know how that makes sense, but okay. And there was no other date. There was nothing bad ever happened over the course of the 4 years. The only time that something bad happened was in Chodesh Nisan. All the Chodashim, nothing bad ever happened. So okay. So anyway, but the fact is that we see, and every time Yom HaShoah comes around, I just I think about, and I know this is going to sound perhaps a little extreme or make me sound like an ideologue, but there's a very dark side to Gentile civilization. That's the truth. They're just very dark people. The Gentile civilization, be it the Arabs, be it the Polacks, be it the Ukrainians, be it the Russians, be it, of course, the Germans, be it the Spaniards, be it the Catholics, be it the Muslims, and they really have very dark, sick, macabre people. And yes, you have 50 decades where they didn't have, for example, America. Thank God there's no pogroms against the Jews. I mean, so far we have Donald Trump. Baruch Hashem, we have at least a president who seems to be opposed to it. But this is the exception. America so far. America is the exception. And the goyim, we have to be honest. We have to stop with this, phony idea of pluralism and we're all basically the same. No, we're not. We're not like the goyim. That's the truth. The goyim are barbarians. And yes, okay, every now and then you'll have some civilization. But when you have civilization, as Sigmund Freud says in the book he published in 1930, Civilization, and it's discontent, there's a lot of discontent with civilization. And for some reason, which I'm not going to get into now, that discontent is aimed towards the Jews, and they act like complete barbarians. So here we have an example of this. I mean, Am Yisrael, we're Am Kadosh, we have family values, there's nothing more Kadosh than the families, and this sick pervert is, he wants to be with the Jewish woman. Not because he lacks any other woman, not because he has a problem finding women, but because it's nice to violate something holy and something beautiful. So it is Holocaust Memorial Day, and I had to just fish albi, just let it out, because you see how the goyim treated us, and it was just despicable. I mean, beyond words. And El Nekamot Adonai, El Nekamot Tofia. I'll be extreme and say we should be zochim to see the real nekama against the goyim for what they did soon. Anyway, so that's Tiba'el Lahagmon. Okay, so let me explain now what's happening here. So there's a certain discrepancy in the Tosefta. You see two pairs. You see the word sakana, and because of the sakana, nahagu ha'am. And now we know what the sakana is, but we still didn't get into the details, right? So that's one concept. And then we have the idea of ones. And because of the ones, it's mutar. Okay? Now, it's a little strange if there's sakana, then madua nahagu. Sakana should be lo nahagu, ela, legamre ni'akeruha, right? And that's why Rava is so important, because what Rava is saying is that there is the idea of sakana as in sakanat nefashot, but not every sakana is sakanat nefashot. Here the sakana was sakana shetiba'el, not sakana shetihareg, right? And that's why it's so important to bring Rava into the discussion, because only through Rava can we understand the meaning of the baraita and the use of the word sakana. So let's continue. All right. So now that was what Rava said. Now the Gemara, the Bet Midrash, now they registered the statement of Rava, which is a clarification of the baraita, but then they say, "Hai sakana onesu." So fair enough. So you're saying that the sakana here is sakana shetiba'el. Okay, but in that case, you should refer to it as ones, right? So why is it called sakana? What's the sakana? Mishum de'ika senuot demasran nafshayu liktala. Since it's going to be women or senuot, we'll explain that in a moment, and these women or senuot would be mosrim themselves to death. We'll explain what that means. And this will be endangering the woman. Now, first of all, let me tell you what it doesn't say. It doesn't say the ika sinuot de masran nafshayu al kiddush Hashem. That's important. Why not? I guess there's no kiddush Hashem here. How can that be? We're gonna have to understand that. How can there not be kiddush Hashem here? Okay, fine. It says diktala, so we have what's written. Okay. Now, what is the idea of sinuot here? Ve'et sinu'in chokhmah. So a person who's reserved, he's more circumspect, right? So we're dealing with women, and Jewish women in general. They have a certain circumspection to them. They don't just, go out publicly and act in a haughty way or act in an aggressive fashion. That's the word I was looking for. And part of that psychological makeup of a woman who's a bit shy, a bit coy, is that bar minan, if she's in a situation like this, she wouldn't know what to do. Now, sometimes we're in situations, bar minan, in life, where, I don't know, a guy comes, give me your watch or I'll blow your brains out. I don't want to give him my watch. It's my I don't know, my father gave me the watch and I don't want to give him the watch and I'm going to fight and he'll take a gun and shoot me. Bar minan, chas v'shalom, not me. Okay. But the point is, when we're exposed to these types of situations, and depending on the psychology of the person, the reaction could be unpredictable. There was in the 80s, for those of you who lived in New York during its long, glorious history of crime, in the 80s there were a lot of rapes. It was very common. And there was a point in the 80s where the police came out and they said, the advice was, I remember growing up, that the woman shouldn't put up a fight. Now, why would they say that? Because rape was endemic, and often fighting back would trigger the instinct of the rapist to kill them. They would start using force, and bar minan, the woman would be strangled to death. Chas v'shalom. Again, I find it very displeasurable to speak about these things. I keep adding these additional adjectives. But the point is that that's exactly the point of the Gemara. That this woman who's circumspect and shy, and she would never, act in a forward manner like this, for her to suddenly be in the presence of a man that wants to be with her, she might end up doing something that will result in her death. Because he wants to be with her and she doesn't want him to be with her. You understand? So that's the idea of mishum de'ika senuot, they are senuot, de masran nafshayu liktala, that they would end up giving their lives over to death. Sakana, and this is the sakana. Okay, and again, so far, I have not addressed the important issue of what about Kiddush Hashem? She's a married woman. Okay, well, let's continue. Velidrosh lehu de ones share. Now, very important to understand the terminology lidrosh. Lidrosh in the Gemara means as follows: there should be a public derasha, because the Bet Midrash. The Bet Midrash was not for everybody. I know there's this crazy idea today that everybody has to go to yeshiva and be in the Best Midrash and anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. Just go study. So like Brooklyn College has some like standards. Even Kingsborough College has a standard. You need to have a pulse and a heartbeat. But then Brooklyn College, you have to, I don't know, something has to function. Like 2 neurons have to somehow transmit. And if there's 2 neurons transmitting, you can get into Brooklyn College. And they have like higher university, then maybe higher. And then if you're completely brain dead, they send you to an Ivy League institution today. That's a tragedy. But the point is that there has to be some standard. And the idea that anybody goes to the best midrash, I don't understand that. Like, is that a good thing, really, that everybody goes to the best midrash? Like, what type of Torah comes out of the best midrash when anybody goes? But okay, be that as it may. And I know they said they have different batei midrash. I had a relative of mine who went to Rabbi Kotler's yeshiva, not my father. I get it that they have a different test, but there's always a best midrash for someone. So that's where I disagree. The point being that back then, no, the Bet Midrash was for the members of the yeshiva, the hachamim, the faculty. There was talmidim. There wasn't an unlimited amount of talmidim. And basically, when they wanted to address the public, there would be a public derasha. The public derasha did not take place in the Bet Midrash. It took place outside the Bet Midrash. There's a few cases in the Gemara where the public derasha takes place outside the house of the Resh Galuta. So the Resh Galuta was the political leader of the Jewish people in Galut, and that's where they would do the derashot. So velidrosh lehu the ones share. So why don't the hachamim, if you're worried about the senuot, that they might end up fighting back too aggressively and then endangering their lives, why don't you tell them, make a derasha, educate them and say, honest is shareh. If it's a situation like this where there's a rapist and he's going to kill you, honest shareh. Again, the question still being, well, if it's the married woman, how can you say honest shareh? She should be, but put that on the side. That's clearly not the case for some reason. Okay? So, ika perusot, because you could have some woman who realizes the situation, they realize, okay, the guy's a rapist, he's a thug, and there's nothing I can do, and okay, so se'lavim, meaning there might be a situation where it would be difficult to distinguish between ones and rason. And let me introduce it to an important point, because I can say this already now. And the point is as follows, and you need to have this point to understand what the Gemara is saying. If you have a married woman and she's raped, that's called honest. And there's no basis to annul the marriage because it was against her will. If it was done berason, then Masechet Sotah, I think Perekei Mishnah Aleph, it has the statement Asula labal, Asula labo'el. She's forbidden to her husband, the marriage has to be annulled, and she's forbidden to the person who was with her. So the problem that Gemara is addressing is, okay, so we have this hagmon. Now the woman knows she has no choice. Now, for some women, it's complete honest. Like for the Senuot, who is like, she's very shy personality, she's very circumspect. For her, it's a horrible experience, and it's an honest, and that's what it is. So then the Chachamim say, okay, if it's honest, it's mutar. Now they can make a public class, say, honest is mutar, don't fight back, don't die for this. So they say no, because there might be some women who, they take a different approach, a different attitude, and for those women, it might end up being not honest. It might be berason. So we can't now go out in public and say, oh yes, of course, it's honest, let it be. No. So you understand, because then she's going to be asura leba'ala. She would be forbidden to her husband. That's the point of where were we just? Ika perusot. That's the point of Ika perusot. But then there's Ika name kohanot. Another problem is that if a woman is married to a kohen, then the law is very strict, and that law is that even if she gets raped, she's asura leba'ala. That's it, right? That the marriage is over. Now, in the case of this hagmon, if this betula was married to a kohen, or her husband was a kohen, and then the marriage would be over, right? So you can't just say onesh shareh. Well, onesh shareh, yeah, but the woman knows that it's going to be the end of her family, right? So you didn't solve anything. That's why it's sakana. You understand the point of sakana? All right. Let's say. All right. Let's stop here for a moment, and we have to really look at this a little more carefully. So the problem in this Gemara, and we're going to look at a moment what the Tosafot say. The problem with this Gemara is really there is a law of Kiddush Hashem, and the law of Kiddush Hashem is dependent on the circumstance. The law of Kiddush Hashem, and this is important to understand the law of Kiddush Hashem, people don't understand it. It has to do with us as Jews fully accepting the sovereignty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a person says Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, it's a political statement. The statement is that I recognize God as the sole sovereign, and He's my sole Adon, right? So Shema Yisrael, this is something that every Jew declares and says, listen, understand, Adonai Eloheinu, God is our sovereign. Adonai Echad, and there's only one sovereign, right? This is related to the idea of Kiddush Hashem. The idea of Kiddush Hashem is a king comes and says, I want you to eat non-kosher. He's not getting any benefit from that. He wants you to eat non-kosher because he wants you to accept his sovereignty at the expense of God's sovereignty. So the law of Kiddush Hashem says no. That's Yahareg Ve'al Ya'avor. So the sovereign comes and says, I want you to skip tefillah, like Daniel, right? And Dariavish. No tefillah. That's why Daniel was willing to get killed for the law of tefillah. Because when we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that's the point of one God. One God whose sovereignty will never be displaced by any other sovereign. So a Bad Minan, a person gives in to the sovereign. That's called Shi'at HaShemad. Shi'at HaShemad means that the king decided to make a gezerah against a particular law of the Jewish people. We metim al Kiddush Hashem for anything. Any mitzvah, any even the smallest mitzvah, be a Mayim HaCharonim. The sovereign told you, don't do Mayim HaCharonim because I want you to follow me and not God, which is a message. Say, no, Hashem Echad. I'm only going to follow God. Now, there are 3 averot that are Yahareg Ve'al Ya'avor in all circumstances. Right? That's Avodah Zarah, Shefichut Damim, and Gilui Arayot. The question now that we're going to be dealing with is, isn't this woman, she's married, she's Eshet Ish, and therefore, it's Yahareg Ve'al Ya'avor. If it's Yahareg Ve'al Ya'avor, why do we even have the question? Meaning we're saying we're worried about the sakana, not sakana. We have to, maybe a woman would be willing to die. Well, yes, it shouldn't be Masan Nafsha Liktala, it should be Masan Nafsha Kiddush Hashem. So the Tosafot, it's important to understand it, and my father deals with this particular Tosafot in his article, The Legal Thinking of Tosafot. The article, The Legal Thinking of Tosafot, caused a lot of waves in the Jewish world, and people got very angry at my father for pointing out the facts that he was pointing out. The facts were very disturbing, and he pointed them out, and people got angry. Why did you point out these facts? Okay, I mean, you know, Sigmund Freud was already dead at the time, so there wasn't much we could do with that.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes, please.
So, yes, I understand the people who love the Matrix get mad when Neo shows up or Morpheus, but some of us who sense that we're in a Matrix and couldn't figure it out, couldn't find our way out, articles such as your father's The Legal Thinking of Tosafot served as a red pill. And even though you end up sleeping on a crappy old Nebuchadnezzar third generation spaceship that barely holds itself together, you'd rather do that and eat gruel than live in the Matrix. That's the truth.
Nice, I like that. That's very, very nice, mashal. Thank you. Okay, so now let's start with the Tosafot. So the Tosafot, you're going to see here, you're going to be two opinions. The opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. You see on the side of the page it says V'lidrosh lehu de ones shareh, right? So I'm going to read through it quickly and explain it, because this goes to the question. There's a whole question of Kiddush Hashem and Gilui Arayot, and how it applies or doesn't apply to women. So it's a very rich topic. So V'lidrosh lehu de ones shareh, right? Why don't you teach them that ones is shareh, and therefore they shouldn't fight back, but rather, if they're in a situation that the guy's raping them, okay, don't die. I mean, okay, the rape is the rape, but at least don't let him kill you, so don't fight back. So, ve'im tomar, ve'ha'amnenan, beperek, ben sorer, umoreh. We're going to be looking at that sugya in a moment. It's quoting the sugya starts in Sanhedrin, Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph, but we're going to go to Sanhedrin, Ayin Dalet Amud Bet. That's the part of the sugya we're going to look at. But anyway, Al kol averot ya'avor ve'al yehareg. All the averot in the Torah, you violate the avon. If a guy comes and says, you know what do you call it? I want you to make me fire. It's Shabbat. Make me fire. Shabbat is very severe, very hamur, but still, ya'avor ve'al yehareg. Right? Again, it's not Shat Hashmat and it's not Paresiyah, let's say. Okay? Hus. Me'avodat kochavim ve'gilui arayot u'shfichut damim. Those three averot is always ya'avor. I'm sorry, always ya'aver, yahareg. Always yahareg ve'al ya'avor. Right? Always, under all circumstances. So here it should be yahareg ve'al ya'avor. So how can we say v'lidlo shehu de ones shareh? Ones is not shareh into this situation. V'tires Rabbeinu Tam. De'en chayavin mita al beilat misri. De'hamana afkarehe. Here, when he says Misri, he couldn't say the real word. He's referring to Nosri. You understand? The closest word to Nosri, a Christian, is Misri. He's not referring to an Egyptian. He's referring to it's a code term for the Christians. They lived in France, right? Dichtiv, and so he's saying. Rahamana afkare lezareh de Misri. They're like non-humans. Dichtiv v'zirmat susim zirmatam. I think the pasuk is asher besar hamorim besaram v'zirmat susim zirmatam. So there's these goyim, they're like animals. And again, I'm sorry, I'm it's Yom HaShoah, and I feel like that. I have no problem at all with what Yehezkel Hanavi said whatsoever. Umaytere ayah deparich beperek ben sorer umoreh haester farhesia havai velafarich vehaester gilui arayot havai or havya. I'm sorry, vehaester gilui arayot havya. Right. So the point of Rabbeinu Tam is as follows. So we're going to look at this again in a moment, and it says, how can Esther Malka agree to be with Melech Achashverosh, right? And the point being that Esther Malka it was an avera that was done in parhesya, in the sense that he took her in a public way, and therefore everybody knew that Esther is with King Ahashverosh. And one of the reasons, I'll let them in, one of the reasons for making it asur is if it's parhesya, meaning if a goy comes to me on Shabbat and says, I want you to light a fire, and it's parhesya, there's Asara Israel there, in that case it's going to be Hareg Ve'al Yavo. So it says, Veha Esther parhesya ve'ad. The question is, how can Esther, it was beparhesya, and she was willing to be with Ahashverosh, they could have asked a much better question. How is Esther HaMalka with Ahashverosh HaMelech? It's Gilui Arayot, and Gilui Arayot is the Hareg Ve'al Yavo in all situations. So the fact that it's not referring to it as Gilui Arayot is because Zirmat Susim Zirmatam, Bezirmat Susim Zirmatam. Mashma de Mishum Arayot Lava Michayeva. Right? There was no sort of Gilui Arayot, right? As such. ומתוך כך התיר רבנו תם לבת ישראל שהמירה ובא עליה עובד כוכבים לקיימה לאותו עובד כוכבים כשנתגייר. דלה שייך למאמר אחד לבעל ואחד לבועל, או אסורה לבעל, אסורה לבועל. בביאת מסרי, דהביה כביאת בהמה. So he says, basically, הלכה למעשה, the bi'ah of the goy is like the bi'ah of the behema. So the bi'ah of the behema is not gilui arayot. It's asur. Obviously, it's asur. Nobody's saying it's not asur. But it's not considered gilui arayot. That's yareg ve'al yavo. So now, what he just said now regarding the, so he makes a very interesting pesach Rabbeinu Tam. So his pesach is a woman, Jewish woman, runs away with the goy. She's married. Okay, so then we say yareg ve'al yavo. I'm sorry, asura labal, asura laboel. So he makes a very interesting pesach halakha lema'aseh. He says, let's say a woman lives in France, a husband can't stand him, she runs away, she goes to a goy. Okay. Asura labal, asura laboel, that's halakha. Right? Masechet Sotah, Masechet Yevamot. Also, asura labal, asura laboel. So, in Masechet Sotah, it's an explicit Mishnah, that's the main place, but Masechet Yevamot also discusses it. So now, what happens? Rabbeinu Tam says something dramatic. He says that since the goy is like a behema, now she can't return to her husband because that's it, that's what Allah. But let's say the goy says, honey, I love you, I want to marry you. He says, you're a goy, I can't marry you. He says, okay, I'm going to convert for you. So he converts. Since when he was a goy, the bi'ah was a bi'at behema, she's not a surah bo'el. So it comes out that she can't return to her husband, but she can be with her goy if he converts and becomes a Jew, and then it would be mutar. That's very interesting pesach. That's Rabbeinu Tam. So Rabbeinu Tam solves the problem by saying that the hagmon is a behema, and the legal status of a behema is the legal status of a behema. And I'm, as you know, I'm not a fan always of the methodology. I like the Sephardic methodology of studying Gemara more, but I don't agree with the principle here. I'm sorry, Mechila, that I'm not from the perspective of Jewish law. I'm saying at the philosophical level, I agree with him that there, and that's the Navi Yechezkel. So, okay, that's Rabbeinu Tam. That's the grandson of Rashi, right? I don't think this is Rabban, who was another grandson of Rashi. I think Rabban was somebody else, maybe. Oh, Rabbeinu Yechiel. No, I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, En nir'ah lelibam. He has a different explanation. Deha al yadeh bi'at oved kochavim ne'esra leba'alaha. He disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam. Kid'amar acha dika perusot u'perek ha'isha shnit'oela gabe ha'isha shnechpesha ben ha'goyim amrenan deberason asura leba'ala ve'amar nameh במגילה כאשר עבדתי כאשר עבדתי מבית אבא עבדתי ממך alma legabe ba'ala la hashiva be'ilat misri kebe'ilat behema. All right, so the point of the Riban is, if it was a bi'at behema, then why is she asura to her husband? That she shouldn't be asura to her husband, and be a bi'at behema, right? Din la bo'el. אף על גב דאין זנות לבהמה ואין ביאת בהמה פוסלת ואוסרת כדמין על פרק הבא לבימיתו ביאת מסרי אביה ביאה וחייב קררה חמנה לזרעה. Okay, let me summarize it. I don't want to read the whole thing. What the Riban is saying is as follows. He's saying that you need to be. I'm going to give you the answer. We didn't get to it. I'm going to give you the answer. his answer is going to be as follows, different than Rabbeinu Tam. So he disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam, and he says, but the reason that in this case it's not Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor, it's because the woman is Karka Olam, meaning she's completely passive. Since the woman is completely passive, she's not doing any action. So let's say in Avodah Zarah, the person is bowing down before a statue. Okay, that's Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor. He's doing an action. In Shefichut Damim, he takes a gun, he pulls the trigger, he's doing an action. In Gilui Arayot, there's no action for the woman, right? So since there's no action for the woman, there's no Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor. That's the Shita of Chachmei Tzarfat. The underlying theory is that it's only the man, in the case of Gilui Arayot, it's only the man who's doing an action, and therefore, for there to be Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor, in the case of Gilui Arayot, it has to be a man. But the woman is always going to be considered involuntary. Okay? That's the theory. So here, since the woman is Karka Olam, even though normally we say Gilui Arayot is Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor, but not for a woman. For a woman, it's not Yehareg ve'al Ya'avor, Gilui Arayot, right? Because she's passive. So that's the Shita of the Ribam. I think Rabbeinu Yehiel, the father of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Yehiel Paris, and he was the father of the Rosh, he presents a similar view, as I recall. But okay, I want to open up the Gemara. But one of my father's greatest articles, is the article on Kiddush Hashem. I don't know if any of you had a chance to read it, but it's wow. So it deals with the sugya that I'm about to read now. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll continue in 5 minutes, okay? Even though I don't need it, but I just figured maybe somebody wants to take a 5-minute break, so I'm going to press pause on the record.